For topic 3, we're going to discuss estimation. So as a quick reminder, we talked about this at the very, very beginning of this worksheet. We know that rounding is the process of approximating a number to make it easier to use and understand. That's fine. Estimation is the process of rounding numbers to make performing operations easier. And you need to understand an estimated answer is not exact, but it should be really close. Okay? So when you're dealing with estimation, you round first, perform your operation. For us, that's going to be addition or subtraction second. Okay, so round first, addition or subtraction second. So let's go ahead and get to it. Now, if you do not have a calculator out, now would be a good time to get a calculator out. This is the type of problem where using a calculator is incredibly useful. So pause, get your calculator out, and let's go ahead and look at this example. So for this example, it says, estimate the total median income for the following states by rounding to the nearest 10,000. Okay, so don't get too hung up on what the median income is. It's not exactly the average, but it's kind of like the general income for an area. Okay, so it's sort of like the middle income for a particular area. So we've got the states in the US with the highest median income. Now remember, anytime you have a table or a chart or a graph, look for some kind of descriptive information about it. So here the description is this table shows 5 states with the highest median income in the US as of 2024. And we can see pretty quickly and easily those states are Maryland, the District of Columbia, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and New Jersey. So the first thing we want to do is round all of these values to the nearest 10,000. You're going to see that this is not terribly exciting when we get into the problem. And then we're going to compare that to the actual grand total. So we're going to take these median incomes, we're going to round them. We're going to use that rounded value to get a really quick estimate for what the median income would be. And then we're going to go to the calculator and find the actual median income. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at these. So we're rounding to the nearest 10,000, okay? And we're going to start with Maryland. So remember, place value, starting from the right, moving left, we have ones, tens, hundreds, comma, thousands, 10,000s. So this first digit for each of these numbers, that's in the 10,000s place. So looking to the right, we have 94,384. 9 is the rounding digit. 4 tells us to round up or down. In this case, the 4 is less than 5. It tells me to round down. So I leave the 9 alone, and then everything after that becomes a 0. So we're asking ourselves, are we closer to 95 or 94,000? Actually 10,000. Are we closer to 90,000 or are we closer to 100,000 is what this one's asking. And in this case, we're closer to 100,000. Okay, so let's see for Maryland. Again, the rounding digit was the 9. The digit to the right of that was a 4. It tells me to round down. We leave the 9 alone. Everything after that becomes a 0. All right, for the District of Columbia, okay, we have 88,311. Rounding to the nearest 10,000, we're asking ourselves, is this closer to 80,000 or is this closer to 90,000? Okay, so you can kind of envision this on a number line if you need to. But the technical directions, this first 8 is in the 10,000s place. Directly to the right of that is another 8, which tells me to round up. That means I add 1 to the rounding digit, so the first 8 becomes a 9, and then everything after that becomes a 0. Okay, let's look at New Hampshire. So for New Hampshire, we have 88,235. So again, we're asking ourselves, is the median income in New Hampshire closer to 80,000 or is it closer to 90,000? Well, the first rounding digit is an 8. That's the first 8. The second digit is the one that tells us to round up or down. Since that second digit is an 8, that tells us to round up, making the first 8 a 9, everything after that 0. So the median income is approximately 90,000 in New Hampshire as well. So let's look at Massachusetts. We have 86,725. So again, are we closer to 80,000 or are we closer to 90,000? You can see pretty clearly we're closer to 90,000, but let's do the steps. So we find our rounding digit, which is the 8. Directly to the right of that, we have a 6. Since 6 is greater than 5, that tells me to round up. So 8 becomes 9. Everything after that becomes a 0. So we're closer to 90,000. And then finally, for New Jersey, arguably one of the greatest states in our country, we have that the median income is 85,239. This one's really close. It's kind of, I mean, it's definitely going to round one way or the other, but it's close. So if you were looking at a number line, you have to be really careful with this one. But we want to know, are we closer to 80,000 or are we closer to 90,000? So the rounding digit again is the 8. Directly to the right of that, we have a 5. That 5 tells me to round up. So even though it's close, I'm still a little tiny bit closer to 90,000 than I am to 80,000. So now we would want to take this list of rounded values and add. Notice these numbers are a lot easier to add. The first, 4 columns that we're going to add are just a series of zeros. So we get 0, 0, 0, comma, 0. And then we have 9 plus 9 is 18. 18 plus 9 is 27. 27 plus 9 is 36. 36 plus 9 is 45. So we can say the approximate total median income for the top 5 states in the US as of 2024 would be 450,000. Now, keep this all in mind. Let's go over to the calculator. We're going to get the actual total and compare the estimate to the total. So if you've got a calculator, grab it. All right, calculator, there we go. All right, so we want to add the actual values, not the rounded values. We've already added the rounded values. So the actual values, let's see, we have 94,384. That was the median income for Maryland. 88,311, whoops. So 94,384 plus. And then 88,311 for the District of Columbia. 88,235 for New Hampshire, plus 86,725 for Massachusetts, plus 85,239 for New Jersey. That gives us a grand total of 442,894. So that's the actual total median income for these 5 states. So let's go back to the worksheet, and we've done the work. We know the actual total is 442,894. Whoops, I forgot my $94. So the actual income, $442,894. So a lot of times with questions like this, you'll then be asked, is the actual number comparing it to the estimate, is the estimate an over or an underestimate? In this case, we could say the estimate overestimates the actual total median income for these 5 states. Now, it's not too far. The actual median income for these 5 states was what? A little more than 7,000 less than the estimate, which isn't too bad. So you can see your estimate is going to sometimes be higher, sometimes lower. It depends on rounding. In this case, all but one of the values we rounded up. So you can kind of, read the writing on the wall and see that you're probably going to be an overestimate. But either way, the estimate is a really close understanding of what the actual income is. And the estimate was really easy to work with versus the actual sum here. Let's go ahead and look at, I think we've got one more. Yeah, we've got one more example with 2 parts. Okay. So here it says estimate each difference. So in this case, we're going to subtract. Remember, difference is the answer to a subtraction problem. So part A, Kylie Jenner is allegedly worth, and I have no idea if these numbers are accurate. This is an old problem. But Kylie Jenner is allegedly worth $748,723,965. Jeff Bezos is allegedly worth $151,602,983,751. Estimate how much more, remember when we see the how much more, that frequently tells us we're going to be subtracting. Estimate how much more Jeff Bezos is worth than Kylie Jenner by first rounding their bank accounts to the nearest 10 million. Okay, so let's look at these 2 numbers. I'm going to rewrite them just so we can work with them. So we have Jeff Bezos over here. And then we have Kylie over here. Excuse me. So let's talk place value. So ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, millions, 10 millions. We were told to round to the nearest 10 million. So that's this digit right here. Okay. So when rounding Jeff Bezos' alleged income or alleged worth, we have a rounding digit of 0. To the right of that, we have a 2, which tells me to round down. So we leave the 0 alone. Everything after that becomes a 0. So his alleged net worth is 151,6, and then everything after that is just a 0. So his net worth is approximately 151,600,000,000. Bless his heart, right? Let's talk about Kylie, okay? So again, tens or ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, millions, 10 millions. This 4 is in the 10 million spot. So looking to the right of that, we have an 8. That 8 tells us to round up. That means the rounding digit goes from a 4 to a 5. And we would say that Kylie's estimated worth is 750 million. Now, what is the difference? We know Jeff clearly has a higher net worth, but by how much? Well, we would subtract the two values. And you can see because we're dealing with a big old string of zeros, the subtraction isn't going to be that hard. Whoops, I don't need a comma there. All right, so let's see here. We line these up on the right-hand side. We're going to subtract column by column, 0 minus 0, again, 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 0 minus 0. And now we've got to do a little work. I can't take 5 from 0, but I can borrow from the 6. So 6 becomes a 5, 0 becomes a 10. 10 minus 5 is 5. I now cannot take 7 from 5, so I borrow one more time. 1 becomes 0, 5 becomes 15. 15 minus 7 is 8. And then I have 0, there's nothing to subtract from it. 5, there's nothing to subtract from it. And 1, there's nothing to subtract from it. So we would say Jeff Bezos is worth $150,850,000,000 more than Kylie Jenner. Okay, so if you wanted to feel bad about your bank account, there you go. All right, part B. Earth is said to be 92,955,807 miles from the sun and 238,855 miles from the moon. Estimate how much closer Earth is to the moon than the sun by first rounding each distance to the 100,000. So we're basically finding the difference in the distance from Earth to the sun compared to Earth to the moon, okay? So we have Earth to the sun is 92,955,807 miles versus the moon, which is 238,855 miles. We want to round each to the nearest 100,000, okay? So remember, ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000. So we have that weird quirky rounding. We did this at one point before. Looking to the right, our rounding digit's a 9. Anytime the rounding digit's a 9, if you have to round up, you're like, ooh, okay? So the rounding digit's a 9. To the right of that, we have a 5, which tells me we do round up. That means we add 1 to the 9. So 9 plus 1 is 10. Keep a 0, carry a 1. 2 plus 1 is 3. There's nothing to add to the 9, so we just drop it down. And remember, after the rounding digit, when we round, everything after that becomes a 0. So the 5, 5, 807, they all become zeros. So the approximate distance from the Earth to the sun is 93 million miles. Okay, now let's look at the moon. The distance from the Earth to the moon is 238,855. So remember, we've got ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s. So that's this 2 here. To the right of that, we have a 3, which tells me to leave the 2 alone. And then everything after that becomes a 0. So this is approximately 200,000. So there we have it. Now we want to know how much difference we are, or how much closer to the moon we are compared to the sun, or what have you. So we subtract. So we get 93 million minus 200,000. Well, 0, 0, 0, comma, 0, 0. So we just had a bunch of zeros. And then I can't take 2 from 0, so I need to borrow. So 3 becomes a 2. 0 becomes a 10. So 10 minus 2 is 8. And then I drop down my 2 and my 9. So I would say I'm 92,800,000 miles closer to the moon than I am to the sun. I had to think about which one was the moon, which one was the sun. So we're 92,800,000 miles closer to the moon compared to the sun. Okay? There you have it. So that's estimating. Remember, when you're estimating, you round first and then add or subtract second. Okay. Now, I will say we dealt with some really nasty numbers in these last 2 examples. We're not generally going to be dealing with numbers that big. That's kind of exclusive to this. Okay. So there you have it. That's rounding and estimating.